Hello engineers, welcome back. In this video, let's discuss another core concept in system design, which are API gateways. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. So we'll start with the first question. What is an API gateway? So for this, let's go to our diagrams. So let's say we have a backend system that looks like this. There are a couple of services and each of them have their own database and they are connected to the web. But in between the main client and our backend system, we have a box in between and we are calling it an API gateway. So why is this required and what are the responsibilities of this box? We'll have a look at it in a short while, but let's try to understand the structure. So in the backend box, let's say this is our black box. There are a bunch of services here. There are a bunch of databases, nodes, etc. And let's say each database is having its own scaling structure and all that. But just for simplicity's sake, let's say there are just two services and they are having their respective databases and both of them are connected via the API gateway to the client. So the client is making a request to the API gateway, and API gateway, the first fundamental responsibility is to do request routing. So the gateway will decide where that request should go. Should it go to service A or should it go to service B? Okay, so this is different from load balancer, where we are talking about two web servers and both are just copies of the same server. So same script is running on both the servers basically. It is just taking care of load balancing, ensuring high availability and stuff. Here, the services are completely different. So A service, let's say, is handling all the API requests for core business functionality, and B service is responsible for, let's say, just sending out notifications, right? So these are two different services running two different scripts and they are listening for two different events, okay? And the API gateway is responsible for choosing where the request should go and it will forward the request accordingly, right? So this is kind of acting like a reverse proxy. So the client does not know the IP address of service A or service B. Client will just contact API gateway. So from the client's point of view, this API gateway is the backend and the entire backend stack is hidden from the client. Okay, so that's how API gateway works. So one of the fundamental responsibilities is to do request routing. Let's see what else can we achieve with API gateway. So we have seen what is an API gateway. It's just a server box that is in between client and our backend system, right? So these are the core responsibilities of an API gateway. First one we have already discussed, which is request routing. So identifying the correct service for that request and forwarding to that request, and also getting back the response and forwarding back to the client, right? And the second thing is protocol translation. So this is something very important when we have multiple protocols involved. Let's say one of the services is using HTTP and it needs to be translated to gRPC, okay? So this kind of translation can also be taken care of by the API gateway. And the third responsibility is aggregation of responses. So if there are responses coming from multiple services, so it's not just about getting response from one service. Maybe we need a collection of responses from multiple services. So in this case, the API gateway can collate or can aggregate all the responses from the different services and send it back to the client, right? So there can be some internal logic in place inside the API gateway itself. And the fourth one is SSL termination. So because the API gateway is standing in between the client and the backend, like this, so this layer needs to be a secure layer because it is exposed to the outside world, right? And this part is never exposed to the outside world. So we can potentially choose not to make this encrypted, okay? So this, because of this behavior, the API gateway can do SSL termination, which means that all the encryption things that are coming in from this side to the API gateway can be decrypted and passed along to the backend. So this is an option. We can still choose to encrypt this piece, or we can just choose to use HTTP, right? So that is also one of the responsibilities of the API gateway. Let's see what other additional responsibilities we can give to this gateway. Because it's a box, we can do multiple things with it. First thing is we can provide authentication and authorization. Let's say we want to have a centralized service for authentication and authorization. We can give all those responsibilities here. We can do JWT tokens, OAuth or whatever. And we can also use RBAC, ABAC kind of concepts to enable authorization as well. And we could also do rate limiting and throttling. So we want to limit the number of requests that can be hit from a particular IP address, let's say. So this can avoid DDoS attacks. So we can also give the responsibility to the API gateway to ensure that it is more secure, right? And we can also do some kind of a caching at gateway level. So let's say we want to cache some responses. We can do that at the API gateway level as well, because again, it's a box and it can hold stuff too, right? And we can also give it responsibility of logging and monitoring. So when we say logging, it can be the central place for all incoming requests. We want to capture who's making the request, what are the request body options or the filters that are being passed, and we can do all kinds of logging like this. We can also do some monitoring. It can take care of health checks of different services and report back if there are any issues. And we could also do circuit breakers with API gateways, because it is taking care of checking the health status of different services. It can check if some faulty service is there. It needs to give it time to recover. So in the meanwhile, it can stop the incoming request so that there is no overload, or it doesn't just make sense to call a faulty service anyway, right? So these are some of the additional responsibilities that an API gateway can take up, right? So let's see some of the common patterns of using an API gateway. So first is the microservices plus API gateway pattern, which we have seen here. So there is service A and service B, and each of them are scaling on their own. These are microservices, and there's a gateway in between, which is taking care of request routing and stuff, right? This is a very common pattern. And the second pattern is backend for frontend. So this is also a pattern that is commonly used. Let's say I want to build backend based on the type of frontend. Let's say I have iOS as a frontend and Android as a frontend, and I have web as a frontend, right? Let's say there are 3 different clients, and I want to give out mobile backend as one of the gateways. So I can build out a mobile gateway, and similarly I can build out a web gateway, and this will be my backend. So the backend will work as it is, but the responses are just navigated differently, so that whatever response is coming from the backend, they can be tailored to cater to mobile needs, and this one can cater to the web needs, right? So we can have different gateways for different purposes, and this is called backend for frontend pattern. It's a very interesting pattern. I'll leave some documentation for you to check out. And finally, let's look at some popular tools for gateways. So I think the most popular one is NGINX. It is a multi-purpose toolbox, open source, and it has a lot of features which we can configure. We can use it as a load balancer, we can use it as a gateway, and that we can do so many other things. Then similarly, Kong is another open source gateway tool which we can use to do multiple responsibilities. And if you need a managed service, we can go for AWS API Gateway or Apigee by Google. So these are again providing similar responsibilities, but they are managed services, and we can get some additional benefits because it is a managed service by these cloud providers, right? So that's all I had for this video, guys. It was a quick introduction to API gateways. I hope you got some basic idea. In the next video, let's try to do a demo and see all of this in action, right? So stay subscribed and stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Do leave a like if you found this helpful. Do subscribe if you haven't done already, so that you don't miss out on any of the future videos. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.